Karen Newell always knew how to attract men, and her new husband was no exception. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to have it all. Their marriage appeared happy, but just 9 months later, tragedy struck. Her husband was murdered right before her eyes in a brutal robbery. The attackers demanded his wallet, but something felt off. Everything seemed too staged, too perfect to be just a random mugging. Was this truly a simple carjacking? Or was the killer a jealous lover, lurking in the shadows? The deeper the police dug, the more suspicious they became. Was this marriage truly built on love? Or was it from the start a perfect facade to hide a ruthless plan? A plan where the price to be paid was John's life. Orange County, Florida, late night, February 20, 1994. On a desolate highway between Cocoa Beach and Orlando, a car suddenly pulled over. In the dim headlights of passing vehicles, a young woman frantically waved her hands, pleading for help. She approached every car that slowed down, and whenever someone stopped, she uttered only one sentence: "Help me. My husband has been shot." Her name was Karen Newell, and the man lying motionless on the pavement, drenched in blood, was her husband, John. He had been shot multiple times. Several drivers stopped to try and help, but it was too late. When the sheriff arrived at the scene just minutes later, he confirmed what everyone feared: John was dead. According to Karen, that night, she and her husband were driving back home to Orlando after a long day at the beach when their car started having issues. When John stepped out to check under the hood, a small sedan pulled up behind them. 3 men were inside. At first, Karen thought they were stopping to help, but no 2 of them stepped out and immediately demanded John's wallet. Karen recalled that the robbery happened too fast. 1 second, they were simply asking for money, and the next, John collapsed to the ground, shot multiple times. The attackers jumped back into their car, sped off, and left her husband bleeding out by the roadside. But the most horrifying part wasn't just the immediate loss. Karen was pregnant. The killers didn't just take John's life. They took away the father of her unborn child. Karen Newell didn't have an easy life. Growing up in hardship left a deep mark on her, but it couldn't extinguish the strong spirit of this young woman. Despite her captivating beauty, Karen's love life was far from smooth. By the end of her 20s, she had already been married and divorced twice. In the spring of 1993, at the age of 28, Karen seemed more focused on her career. The brunette wasn't just striving for success at work, she was also trying her luck in local beauty pageants, hoping to chase her dream of becoming a model. But perhaps Karen's true stroke of luck didn't come from the runway. It came from a small bar in the suburbs of Orlando. That was where she met John Newell. From the first glance, Karen might have been drawn to the tall man with striking blue eyes. But John wasn't just handsome, he was a master mechanic with a good salary, 2 cars of his own, and a decent amount of savings. That night, John took Karen home, but their connection wasn't just a fleeting romance. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, and perhaps something mysterious that set her apart. As for Karen, she too was swept up in the whirlwind romance with John. Before long, their relationship became more serious than ever. On May 22, 1993, just 2 months after their passionate first night, John and Karen decided to get married. Everything happened so quickly, but both seemed to believe they had found their soulmate. After the wedding, Karen excitedly shared with John about a new career opportunity. She claimed that thanks to her connections in the modeling industry, she had landed a job involving television product promotions. This meant a packed schedule, frequent travel, and constant busyness. But Karen reassured her husband that no matter where she went, she would always come back to him. 7 months into their marriage, Karen announced joyful news. She was pregnant with their first child. John was overwhelmed with happiness. He eagerly awaited the moment he would become a father, believing that the baby's arrival would bring them closer than ever. Sean, a close friend of John's, once said that John loved Karen deeply. He always made an effort to keep the romance alive in their relationship. Just days after Valentine's Day in 1994, The couple even planned a short getaway to the beach, a way to enjoy some sweet moments together before their child was born. But no one could have predicted that this would be one of their last moments together. On Sunday morning, February 20, John and Karen packed their bags, got in their car, and drove an hour east to the beach. They spent the entire day enjoying the fresh ocean breeze before heading back to Orlando in the evening. But as they passed the toll booth at exactly 5:28 p.m. and turned onto State Road 520, things took a strange turn. The car suddenly showed signs of malfunction. John and Karen decided to pull over. John stepped out to check, but within seconds, a horrifying event unfolded. Late Sunday night, February 20, 1994, in Orange County, Florida, a brutal murder occurred on a desolate highway outside Orlando. The victim was John Newell, 29, husband of Karen Newell. By the time police arrived at the scene, John was already dead. His distraught wife, Karen, recounted to detectives that their car had broken down, and just as John stepped out to inspect it, a strange vehicle suddenly pulled up beside them. 3 men got out demanding John's wallet, but in the blink of an eye, according to Karen, one of them pulled out a gun and fired multiple shots at her husband. Despite being in shock, Karen was able to provide police with crucial details. She described the attackers' appearances, their car, and even remembered part of the license plate, along with a distinctive bad boy sticker on the rear window. Police immediately issued an urgent alert and launched a manhunt for the killers. Based on the .22 caliber shell casings found at the scene, investigators determined that the 3 suspects were armed and extremely dangerous. However, one odd detail stood out: the assailants had fled so quickly that they left behind John's wallet, the very thing they had demanded in the first place. That night, law enforcement focused on tracking down the car with the bad boy sticker while also heading to the hospital to continue questioning Karen. She was still distraught but lucid enough to answer their questions. A complex case was beginning to unravel. According to Karen's statement, she and John had spent a joyful day at the beach, where they were later joined by a friend named P.J. Giffen. P.J. was not just a friend, but also Karen's assistant, helping her with film production work. After a long day in the sun and waves, the 3 of them left Karen and John in one car, while P.J. drove separately. On the way back to Orlando, Karen claimed she had been following P.J.'s car, but lost sight of him after passing a toll booth. It was then that her car started malfunctioning, with the steering wheel shaking abnormally. John, a skilled mechanic, told Karen to pull over so he could take a look. Karen stated that they both got out of the car. She walked around to check the wheels, while John inspected under the hood. At that moment, another car suddenly approached from behind. Karen, who was crouched near the front of their vehicle, didn't see everything clearly. Then, gunshots rang out. In the chaos, Karen took cover near the front of the car, confused and terrified by what was happening. She initially thought it was just a robbery, but what she couldn't understand was why the attackers murdered John and then left without taking his wallet. Instead of immediately suspecting the grieving widow of lying, investigators chose to explore other possible leads. Instead of rushing to accuse the newly widowed Karen of lying, investigators decided to broaden their investigation. A police report revealed that not long before John was murdered, there had been an attempted break-in at the Newells' home. Around 9 p.m. that night, as darkness settled outside, Karen heard strange noises coming from the backyard. She immediately alerted John, but as he stepped outside to check, he was suddenly ambushed by 2 masked men wielding baseball bats. They brutally attacked him, leaving him in a terrible state. Fortunately, a neighbor heard the commotion and turned on their lights, scaring off the assailants. Karen quickly called 911. Though John was not seriously injured, he was unable to provide any useful information beyond the fact that someone had apparently tried to break into their home. At the time, the incident was dismissed as a failed burglary. However, when John was murdered just a few months later, the break-in took on a far more sinister implication. Investigators began interviewing John's friends and family, but no one could point to any known enemies. John was known as a kind-hearted man, always willing to help others. Yet a surprising detail emerged recently. John had taken in a new roommate, none other than Peter P.J. Giffen, Karen's assistant. What raised eyebrows even more was that P.J. had moved in right after the break-in, and according to accounts, it was Karen who had suggested it. "Why don't we let my young assistant move in? He's such a nice guy." John, trusting and easygoing, agreed without hesitation. But now, police began asking a critical question. Was there something suspicious between Karen and PJ? Was their relationship more than what they let on? And if so, was John's death really a random robbery, or was there a deeper, more calculated crime at play? By late February 1994, a week had passed since Karen Newell had witnessed her husband's murder on a deserted stretch of highway outside Orlando, Florida. She claimed that the robbers had suddenly jumped out of their car, confronted John, and demanded his wallet. However, investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Office were growing increasingly skeptical of her story. They began questioning the relationship between Karen and Peter P.J. Giffen. Were they really just friends? And was the child Karen was carrying truly John's? Shortly after the murder, police summoned P.J. for questioning. He partially corroborated Karen's story about the three of them spending the day at the beach. P.J. claimed that he had consumed 12 cans of daiquiri, smoked marijuana, and then driven home ahead of Karen and John. But when investigators traveled to P.J.'s hometown of Port St. Lucie and started digging, his story began to unravel. Contrary to Karen's claims, P.J. was not her production assistant. In reality, he was nearly jobless, a high school dropout, drifting aimlessly through life. John's friends had long suspected that P.J. and Karen were involved in something more than just friendship. But what shocked investigators even more was how their relationship had actually begun. In the summer of 1993 on Florida's Turnpike, P.J. happened to spot Karen driving alone with a pair of handcuffs in her car. Jokingly, he told her to cuff him. But instead of laughing it off, Karen gave him a sly smile and began flirting with the teenager. Before long, the two had plunged into a secret affair. But while Karen may have seen P.J. as nothing more than a reckless fling, P.J. believed it was true love. He even told friends that he was married to Karen, an absurd claim, but one that revealed much about his mindset. What intrigued police most was P.J.'s potential motive. If Karen was pregnant with his child, then John was the only obstacle standing in their way. And if that were true, P.J. had every reason to want John gone for good. Although confirming the affair between Karen and P.J. provided a clear motive, investigators still needed concrete evidence to link them to the murder. Specifically, they needed to locate the murder weapon, a .22 caliber gun, based on shell casings found at the scene. Over the following days, police questioned the couple's friends, but a shocking revelation came when they spoke with one of Karen's ex-husbands. They discovered something even more suspicious. P.J. wasn't the only man Karen had been involved with. She had remained in contact with her ex-husband and had even borrowed a gun from him. At the time, her request seemed reasonable to the former spouse, especially given that John had recently survived a brutal baseball bat attack. But the most incriminating detail? The gun Karen borrowed was a .22 caliber, the exact same type as the murder weapon. A simple ballistics test could confirm if this was the gun used in the killing. However, when police asked Karen's ex to turn over the firearm, they hit a roadblock. Karen had never returned it. Now investigators were certain she was involved in the crime. But rather than rushing to arrest her, they needed ironclad evidence that would hold up in court. As they dug deeper into her past, they unearthed another crucial detail. Back in 1989, Karen had a criminal record for credit card fraud. On February 28, 8 days after her husband's murder, Karen Newell was arrested by the Orange County Sheriff's Office for violating her probation. While she was in custody, investigators continued gathering evidence. They interviewed a man named Louis Aragona, Karen's stepbrother, and uncovered a bombshell revelation. According to Louis, as early as the summer of 1993, Karen had approached him with a chilling proposal. John had a $500 life insurance policy, and she wanted Louis to help plan his murder so she could cash in. Louis refused to take part in the shooting, but he revealed something even more disturbing. Karen had already attempted to kill John in November 1993 with P.J. Giffen as her accomplice. Their plan was to murder John in his own home. However, when P.J. attacked, John cried out in pain, prompting neighbors to turn on their lights and look outside. Fearing exposure, P.J. panicked and fled. Karen didn't give up. Just days after the failed attack, she again reached out to Louis, urging him to help her carry out the plan. Once again he refused, but P.J., he didn't. This revelation marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. If Louis's account was true, it proved that Karen and P.J. had conspired to kill John long before the supposed random robbery took place. By late March 1994, the case had reached a turning point. Acting on a search warrant, police discovered a safe in John's home, registered in Karen's name. Inside, they found a trove of financial documents, including all of John's life insurance policies. The most shocking find, a $500,000 life insurance policy with Karen as the sole beneficiary. Not only that, but investigators uncovered a damning fact. In the week following John's death, Karen had already begun withdrawing money from the insurance payouts. She showed no signs of grief. Instead, she had swiftly contacted the insurance companies, demanding the money. The evidence was undeniable. This was no random robbery. It was a carefully orchestrated murder for money scheme. On March 28, 1994, less than a month after P.J. Giffen's arrest, both Karen and her teenage lover were officially charged with the murder of John Newell. In the trial of Karen Newell, prosecutors painted a picture of a cunning woman who had planned her husband's murder from the very beginning of their relationship. They argued that Karen had set her sights on John Newell as early as March 1993, not for love, but for his life insurance money. Just weeks after their wedding in May 1993, she secured the first $250,000 policy, then continued adding more over their 9-month marriage. This ensured that when John died, Karen would become rich. But she needed someone else to pull the trigger, and Peter P.J. Giffen was the perfect pawn. According to prosecutors, Karen used her charm to manipulate P.J., a naive young man, turning him into a killer. She promised love, used sex as a weapon, and even lied about being pregnant with his child to deepen his involvement in the plot. But that lie unraveled the night John was killed. When Karen was taken to the hospital, doctors ran a pregnancy test. It was negative. Even more damning, her medical records revealed that she had previously undergone tubal ligation, making pregnancy impossible. With this mountain of evidence, prosecutors were convinced that Karen was not just guilty of murder, she was a cold-blooded mastermind willing to do anything to get what she wanted. They sought the death penalty. The final piece of evidence came from P.J. Giffen's own testimony. Facing the possibility of a death sentence, he broke his silence in the interrogation room. He confessed everything: the affair, the murder plot, and how Karen had manipulated him into carrying it out. According to P.J., after their failed attempt to kill John with a baseball bat in November 1993, Karen immediately devised a new plan. On February 20, 1994, she, John, and P.J. spent the day at the beach, enjoying themselves as if nothing was wrong. But on the drive back to Orlando, she created the perfect opportunity for P.J. to strike. Karen drove ahead while P.J. followed in his own car. After passing a toll booth, Karen pretended to have car trouble. She told John they needed to pull over and check the vehicle. As they stopped on the roadside, P.J., with the murder weapon in hand, approached. Without hesitation, he aimed the gun at John's head and said, "Consider this a divorce." Then He pulled the trigger. John collapsed, but PJ didn't stop. He fired 3 more shots into John's chest, ensuring he was dead. PJ's confession not only sealed Karen's fate, but also led investigators to the most critical piece of physical evidence, the murder weapon. He revealed that after the killing, he had tossed the gun into a lake a few miles from the crime scene. When police searched the designated area, they found the weapon. Ballistics tests confirmed it was the gun that fired the fatal bullets, but the most damning evidence? The gun's serial number matched the firearm Karen had borrowed from her ex-husband before the attack. This directly linked her to the murder weapon, proving she had orchestrated every detail of her deadly plan. With PJ's testimony, the recovered gun, and a clear financial motive, prosecutors had everything they needed to charge Karen with first-degree murder. Karen Newell's case was no longer a mystery. She had not only manipulated a teenager into killing for her, but had also calculated every move to ensure her plan's success. But would she receive the death penalty as prosecutors hoped? That decision lay in the hands of the jury. Facing overwhelming evidence, Karen Newell had no choice but to take a plea deal to avoid execution. The agreement between her defense and prosecutors spared her from the death sentence, but sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for P.J. Giffen, despite being the one who pulled the trigger, his cooperation with authorities earned him a reduced charge of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison, a price for being manipulated into Karen's deadly scheme. The case closed with both conspirators behind bars, but the tragedy remained. A man lost his life, all because of greed and the betrayal of a wife he had trusted. As the sun rose over the peaceful suburbs of Fairfield, New Jersey, a shocking tragedy began to unfold. An elderly mother, who had once been the emotional cornerstone of the entire family, was discovered lying motionless on the cold floor. At first glance, her death seemed to be a suicide, but the truth is always harsher than we expect. When the police arrived at the scene, they had no idea that they were about to uncover a dark secret, a story of greed, betrayal, and an unforgivable crime. And the perpetrator none other than the victim's closest relative. What truly happened on that fateful morning? Was this a meticulously planned murder, or just a moment of impulsive regret? The answer will send a chill down your spine. On July 23, 2009, in Fairfield, New Jersey, a tragedy struck in a quiet suburban home. Tina Loney and her husband, Christopher, seemed to be enjoying a stable and fulfilling life. They were capable of taking care of Tina's elderly mother, but everything suddenly collapsed. One fateful morning, Christopher was horrified to find his mother-in-law lying motionless on the floor, cold to the touch. At first glance, it appeared to be a suicide, but authorities were unsure. The investigation later uncovered a shocking truth. Tina Loney, the seemingly perfect woman, was living a double life. And the most horrifying part, the victim was her own mother. On July 23, 2009, in Fairfield, New Jersey, a small, peaceful town, at 9:00 a.m., the 911 operator received a frantic call. "My wife just found her mother on the floor. She's in critical condition. We need an ambulance right away." Within 10 minutes, the police and emergency medical team arrived at the scene. Upon arrival, they saw Christopher Loney and his wife Tina anxiously waiting at the entrance to her mother's apartment, a small space located in the basement of the house. Tina, with red eyes and sobbing, told the police that she had found 81-year-old Marie Zotti lying motionless on the floor. Immediately, an officer requested Tina to lead them to where Marie was. As they approached the body, one officer bent down, placing 2 fingers on her wrist to check for a pulse. And then he slowly raised his head, confirming a chilling truth. Marie Zotti was dead. Marie Zotti was cold to the touch. There was blood around her head, which could suggest that the 81-year-old woman had suffered an accident, possibly a heart attack, causing her to fall face first onto the floor, resulting in a bleeding wound. But when the police gently turned her body over, they made a shocking discovery. This was not a natural death. Tightly wrapped around her neck was a necktie. A suicide? Impossible, at least according to Tina. She shakily handed the police a piece of paper that she claimed to have found near the body. It contained only one line: "Tell the kids I love them." In the following days, investigators would face more questions than answers. And when the truth was finally revealed, it would lead them to a terrifying conclusion about Marie Zotti's death, one no one could have anticipated. Tina Zampi was born in 1967 and grew up in New Jersey in a family with a legal background. Her father was a police officer. Her mother, Marie Zotti, was a devout woman who devoted her life to her family, husband, children, and the church. In 1992, Tina married Christopher Loney, and not long after, the young couple moved to Fairfield, settling in a peaceful, affluent neighborhood. By 1995, their life had become stable enough that they decided to invite Tina's widowed mother, Marie, to live with them. The small apartment downstairs was the perfect place for her to be closer to her grandchildren. A year later, Tina and Chris welcomed their first child, a son, and 2 years after that, they had a daughter. The children were very close to their grandmother, calling her Nana, and Marie always showered them with love. Not only that, but she played an important role in Tina's life, a relationship that seemed incredibly close and perfect. After years of nurturing, their family decided to take a long-awaited vacation along with friends from the neighborhood to Outer Banks. On July 22, 2009, Tina happily made the final payment for the trip, but they would never set foot in Outer Banks that summer. Less than 24 hours later, Christopher called the police to report a shocking piece of news. "My wife just found her mother, dead." At first, it seemed like a suicide, but as investigators got involved, they began uncovering a dark secret, one that could completely shatter the image of this seemingly perfect family. On the morning of July 23, 2009, Tina Loney, 41 years old, called her husband Christopher in a state of panic. Her voice was trembling as she announced, "My mom, she's committed suicide." Hearing this, Christopher rushed out of work and drove home to Fairfield, New Jersey. When he arrived, he found his mother-in-law, Marie Zotti, 81 years old, lying motionless on the floor of the basement apartment. The sight left him stunned. "This can't be." He immediately called 911 and urgently requested an ambulance. But when the police arrived at the scene, things started to get strange. Tina insisted that it was a suicide, and even handed over a suicide note which she said she found near her mother's body. But what puzzled the police was the manner in which Marie died. A men's tie was tightly wrapped around her neck. There were no signs of hanging or external force. This does not fit the profile of a typical suicide. If Marie had truly taken her own life, why were there no signs of hanging? The police began to suspect that this was a murder. But who would want to kill an 81-year-old woman? A robbery? Impossible. As they searched the scene, they noticed no signs of forced entry. The front door wasn't broken, the lock was intact, and nothing was missing. So, if this wasn't a robbery, what was the real motive behind the killing? In hopes of finding a clue, the police focused on the only lead they had, Tina and Christopher Loney. Immediately, the couple was called into the Fairfield Police Department for questioning. In the interrogation video, Tina tried to stay calm as she recounted what happened. "I walked around the house, looked through the window, and I saw my mom lying face down on the floor. At that point, I thought she might have fallen off the chair or something. I panicked. I ran around the house, found an unlocked window, and climbed in." When she entered her mother's apartment, Tina found that her mother had a broken hip. But what was even more shocking was the tie wrapped around her neck. At that moment, instead of calling 911 immediately, Tina called her husband first, which made the police suspicious. Why would she do that? Tina explained in a confusing manner. "I think when a loved one passes, you should notify the family first." But when asked about her mother's supposed suicide, Tina couldn't provide a clear answer. She only recalled a strange conversation they had a few weeks before. My mom told the kids, "You don't need me. You won't remember me." The words seemed to have a negative implication, but it wasn't enough to conclude that Marie had wanted to take her own life. Then the police asked an important question, the tie wrapped around her mother's neck. "Whose was it?" Tina hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's my husband's." A shock. Why would an 81-year-old woman commit suicide with her son-in-law's tie? This raised further suspicions that there was something suspicious about the death of Marie Zotti. The case slowly unfolds. The mystery of the tie. Could Christopher be involved in his mother-in-law's death? When the police interrogated Christopher, his testimony completely matched what Tina had said. He confirmed, "I don't know what happened before my wife called. When I got there, my mother-in-law was dead, and Tina had covered her up. All I know is what my wife told me." But the investigators weren't easily convinced. When the autopsy results were released, everything became clearer. Marie Zotti did not commit suicide. She was murdered. The examination showed that the cause of death was strangulation. She couldn't have suffocated herself with the tie, and there were no signs of hanging. Someone had strangled her to death. Her broken ribs indicated a struggle or violence, and the time of death was one day before Tina reported it to the police. What does that mean? Marie Zotti had been dead since Wednesday morning, yet Tina and Christopher went about their day, apparently unaware that a dead body was downstairs. That seemed implausible. New clues. The Loney family's secret. The police began to investigate the Loney family's life in more detail. They uncovered a shocking truth. The electricity had been cut off for months due to unpaid bills. Marie was being sued for credit card debt. The house was facing foreclosure, and the family was in a severe financial crisis. Could Marie's death be related to financial issues? Tina Loney disappears. A shocking twist on Friday afternoon, just as the police were preparing to summon Tina for a second round of questioning. Christopher walked into the police station with a shocking announcement. "My wife is missing." What was going on? Tina had disappeared just as the police were about to question her again. Soon, investigators would pressure Tina to face the truth, and she would reveal a shocking secret. July 24, 2009, more than 24 hours since Tina and Christopher reported Marie Zotti's death to the police. Initially, everything seemed like a suicide. Tina testified. She found her mother dead in the basement, and then called her husband, Christopher. He was working, and after receiving the news, he rushed home and called the police. But the investigators had an important task. Was this a murder or truly a suicide? The autopsy results provided the answer. Marie did not commit suicide. She was murdered. And the suicide note no longer made sense. Before the police could interrogate Tina again, something unexpected happened. Christopher walked into the police station and reported, "My wife is missing." Tina had disappeared just when the investigation was about to make a breakthrough. What was she running from? Soon, the investigators would follow the trail to uncover the horrifying truth behind this case. Morning of July 24, 2009, Tina Loney suddenly disappears. Christopher's testimony. The whole family had spent the night at his sister's house, and no one slept well after the tragedy. Tina looked distressed, anxious, and almost in shock. At 6 a.m., both of them woke up. At 6:15 a.m., Tina said she wanted to go shopping. Christopher offered to go with her, but she firmly refused. After that, Tina disappeared without a trace. Christopher, worried, called a friend and spent hours driving around town looking for her. There was no sign of Tina, and fearing she might do something reckless, Christopher decided to call the police. But the investigators had another theory. If Tina was the murderer, was Christopher hiding the truth for her? If Christopher were the killer, had he done something to Tina as well? Interrogation room. Christopher investigated. He was questioned about the family's life, particularly the financial problems. The police discovered that Christopher had no idea about the massive debt Tina had pushed the family into. He was shocked to learn that they were going bankrupt. Shocking statement from the police. Tina Loney is now the primary suspect in the murder of her mother. But why would she kill her own mother? Does the family's financial crisis have anything to do with this case? The most important thing right now is to find Tina before it's too late. The search for Tina was unsuccessful, but an important clue emerged. Where did Tina go after she disappeared? She walked to a store, then took a bus to Atlantic City. But instead of mourning her mother's death, Tina took a shocking action. Less than 24 hours after her mother's murder, Tina appeared at the Trump Marina Casino. Security cameras recorded her playing slot machines on the boardwalk. The police followed the trail, but when they arrived, Tina had disappeared. The trail grew cold. However, Fairfield police received an emergency 911 call. Could this be the breakthrough to uncover the truth? Why did Tina go to the casino? Where did the family's money go? The truth was about to be revealed. On July 27, 2009, an emergency call from a citizen walking his dog helped police find Tina Loney. She was walking on Long Acres Road, and in her purse, investigators found suicide notes addressed to her husband, Christopher. The truth began to unfold. Just an hour after her arrest, Tina sat in front of the camera, ready to reveal the entire truth. Do you want me to tell you what happened to my mother? An open-ended, ominous question from Tina. Tina confessed to killing her mother. She recalled the heartbreaking details of how she killed Marie. The first used the tie to strangle my mother to death. A shocking twist. Tina's confession not only involved the death of her mother, but also revealed a huge secret. She had been having an affair. Christopher had no idea about his wife's extramarital affair and was completely unaware of the murder. The deception was exposed. Tina admitted everything, and when the confession ended, she was arrested for murder. As Tina was taken to Essex County Jail, Christopher was still grappling with the horrifying truth about his wife and mother. The price of betrayal and crime. Could Christopher overcome this shock? On May 7, 2013, Tina Loney, 45, was led into the courtroom in New Jersey to face the unimaginable crime, the brutal murder of her elderly mother, Marie Zappi, 81. Although she had confessed to the crime from the start, Tina later retracted her confession and stated that she had been in a state of confusion when making the statement. Investigators uncovered key details about Tina's motive. According to the prosecution, Tina killed her mother for money. Part of the reason for this was to continue her gambling behavior, which Marie could not accept. The financial motive behind the crime. After investigation, it was revealed that Tina was deeply in debt and needed money to pay off the debts and continue gambling at casinos. Trial verdict. The jury reached a verdict at the end of the trial, and Tina Loney was found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison for killing her mother to seize her money. A shocking crime that stunned the community, as no one could believe that a daughter would be willing to kill her own mother just for money to feed her gambling habit. This case left an indelible wound in the hearts of Marie Zappi's family and friends. Tina Loney now faces a harsh sentence for her heinous crime. A broken family, a brutal murder, and secrets gradually uncovered. Laurie Cohn and her daughter Jackie were never truly close. But when tragedy struck Laurie's husband and Jackie's father, Jack Cohn was murdered in his own home, everything changed. Jack was beaten to death in a violent break-in, leaving the two women in shock and grief. At first, the loss seemed to bring them closer. But soon doubts arose and suspicion crept into every conversation. As their relationship fractured, they began to turn against each other. Who was truly behind the murder? As fingers point and accusations fly, the police must unravel buried secrets to uncover the truth. And in moments of desperation, people are capable of things no one could ever imagine. San Bernardino, California to OM, April 2, 2012. A 911 call pierced the quiet night. Jackie Cohn, 23, trembled as she dialed, fearing for her father, Jack Cohn, 64. She and her mother, Laurie Cohn, 47, had just returned home to a horrifying scene, the front door wide open, Jack's truck missing. As Jackie tried to explain the situation to the dispatcher, Laurie rushed inside. Seconds later, she returned, her face pale, snatching the phone from her daughter's hand. Her voice shook with panic. "I can't find my husband." Still holding the phone, Laurie ventured deeper into the dark house, stepping into the back bedroom. She fumbled in the darkness, her eyes scanning the room until they stopped. Jack Cohn lay there, in a pool of blood, beaten to death. When police and paramedics arrived, they quickly realized there was nothing they could do to save Jack Cohn. He had been brutally beaten to death, his hands and feet tightly bound with rope and duct tape, his body covered in wounds. The room reeked of blood, bearing the marks of a violent attack. Jack was not just an ordinary man. He was a licensed gun dealer who owned hundreds of firearms in his home. And now he was dead. At the scene, the police quickly separated Laurie and Jackie for questioning. Laurie, still in shock, said that she and her daughter had been gambling at the casino all night. When they returned home, they found the front door wide open and Jack lying motionless on the bedroom floor. Sitting on the grass in front of the house, Laurie sobbed, her voice breaking as she spoke of her late husband. "He was my best friend." Born in 1965 in California, Laurie Jean Gibson was not the type of woman to easily break down in tears. She was confident, tough, a woman who had learned to survive from a young age. Laurie grew up in poverty and started working at 15 to support herself. But her life truly hit rock bottom in 1984 when she had nowhere to go and not a single penny to her name. At just 19 years old, she wandered through San Bernardino, taking odd jobs to survive. A friend took her in, offering her shelter and even hiring her for household tasks. It was during this time that Laurie met her friend's older brother, a man who would change her life forever. Jack Cohn was 17 years older than Laurie and a modestly successful man. He ran a TV repair shop in San Bernardino, where many locals had brought their televisions for servicing. In addition, Jack was a licensed firearms dealer, a business that provided him with a steady income. He was funny, kind, and generous. Despite his stable career, Jack remained single at 36 until he met Laurie. That changed quickly. Just weeks after they met, Laurie moved in with Jack at his home, which doubled as his repair shop. Jack provided her with a place to stay, and in return, Laurie helped out at the store, answering calls and assisting with daily tasks. What began as an employer-employee relationship soon turned into something more. In 1989, they welcomed their daughter, Jackie, their only child. She became the bond that brought Laurie and Jack closer than ever. Jack adored Jackie, spoiling her unconditionally. As Jackie started school, Laurie took on a bigger role in helping Jack expand his business. Over a decade together, their marriage seemed solid and stable. But even as life appeared peaceful, cracks began to form, especially in Laurie's relationship with her daughter. Jackie, once a daddy's girl, became a rebellious teenager. She got into trouble at school, struggled with authority, and, most notably, had a strained relationship with her mother. While Jack continued to indulge his daughter, Laurie felt increasingly pushed aside, fueling tensions between husband and wife. In the years that followed, Jackie's life spiraled out of control. She married young, had several children, but her marriage failed. Eventually, she turned to drugs, not just using methamphetamine, but also dealing it. In early 2012, Jackie was arrested. Jack was devastated to see his daughter handcuffed and taken away by the police. But when she was released at the end of March, the aging father welcomed her back with open arms, continuing to care for her without hesitation. Surprisingly, this time, even Laurie seemed happy to have Jackie back. She decided to put past conflicts aside and invited her daughter out for a night together. The two spent the entire night at the casino, but as they drove home at 4 a.m. on April 2, 2012, a horrifying tragedy awaited them. In the early hours of April 2, 2012, in San Bernardino, California, Laurie Cohn discovered her husband, Jack Cohn, beaten to death inside their home. A brutal murder, but was it a robbery gone wrong or something far darker? When police arrived at the scene, all initial signs pointed to a violent break-in. Someone had entered the house in the middle of the night and encountered Jack. But it seemed the intruders weren't just after ordinary valuables. Jack wasn't just a TV and satellite repairman. He was also a licensed gun dealer who owned hundreds of firearms. In an area rife with gang activity that made him a particularly dangerous target, Jack was not a careless man. He was extremely cautious about protecting his assets and his life. All his firearms were stored in a specially locked room, secured behind a heavy-duty safe door. He had even installed a surveillance camera system, turning his home into a true fortress. But on the night of the murder, none of these security measures mattered. The killers cleaned out the gun room, stole Jack's truck to transport their loot, and even took the DVR containing footage from the surveillance cameras. And yet, there was something strange. The intruders hadn't touched the store's safe, which contained $9,000 in cash. Evidence at the scene suggested Jack had been awakened in the middle of the night. When found, he was still wearing his pajamas. His hands and feet were bound with rope, and his neck had been restrained. It appeared that the attackers had tortured him, trying to force him to open the safe. When he refused to cooperate, they beat him to death. At the crime scene, Lori and her daughter Jackie seemed completely devastated by Jack's tragic death. They cried, appeared in shock, and struggled to process what had happened. But as the police looked closer, something didn't add up. How had the intruders so easily bypassed Jack's security system? How could a heavily secured home be broken into with no signs of forced entry or significant struggle? Police quickly began to suspect that this wasn't just a random burglary. It might have been an inside job. It didn't take long for them to identify a possible accomplice. The first name on their list of suspects was Jackie. Early information suggested that Jackie might have leaked details about her father's security system to some acquaintances, leading them directly to the house on that fateful night while she and her mother were away. Lori appeared shocked and confused when she heard this theory. She cooperated with the police, even admitting that she had her own doubts about her daughter. Jackie had a criminal record, a history of drug addiction, and had been involved in multiple troubles before. But when detectives asked Lori point-blank whether she believed Jackie could have killed her own father, she hesitated. After a moment of silence, Lori finally said, "She's still Jack's daughter. I don't think she could do it. Even if Jackie was somehow involved, there was a major problem. She had an alibi." Lori insisted that the two of them had been gambling at the casino all night. This complicated the case for the police. They decided to review surveillance footage from the casino to verify Lori's story. And the footage confirmed it. Lori and Jackie had indeed been at the casino, gambling throughout the night. But then Jackie revealed a shocking secret about her mother. Jackie sat there, tears streaming down her face, as she told the police the truth about her parents' marriage, a truth she had long chosen to ignore. "My mother had a gambling problem. When she lost too much, she started pawning my dad's stuff, then selling it outright. But that wasn't the worst part. She was addicted to meth too," Jackie choked out. The police were stunned by this revelation. From the beginning of the case, Lori had appeared as a grieving wife, shattered by her husband's death. But if what Jackie said was true, Lori wasn't just a heartbroken widow, she was a woman hiding dark secrets. Jackie continued, "My dad knew about the gambling. They fought about it all the time. But things got worse when my mom lost too much money. He worked so hard his whole life, but she just threw it all away at the casino. The fights got worse, and I think she wanted to get rid of him." The officers listened intently as the pieces of the case started to come together. Could Lori have been behind Jack's murder? Had she arranged for someone to kill him to cover up her debts and addiction? Jackie had just exposed a completely different narrative, one that could turn Lori from a witness into a suspect. She recalled a moment that now sent chills down her spine, seeing the name Shauna Bayliss appear on her mother's phone screen, a name tied to a world of crime and drugs. "Shauna called my mom and asked about Jack's keys," Jackie said, her voice trembling. The police immediately understood the significance of this detail. If Shauna had called Laurie to ask about the keys, it was highly likely that Laurie had given them access to Jack's house. And if that was true, this wasn't a random burglary, it was a planned robbery, with Laurie's involvement. Jackie went on, "My mom got involved with those people after my dad kicked her out. She had no money, nowhere to go, and they gave her a place to stay in exchange for drugs." The police started piecing the timeline together. Jack had finally had enough and kicked Laurie out of the house. Homeless and desperate, Laurie fell in with criminals and addicts. Over time, she became entangled with them. When Jackie was released from jail, Laurie wanted to mend their relationship, so she took her daughter out for the night on the same night Jack was murdered. But on their way home, Laurie received a call from Shauna, a woman connected to dangerous criminals. If Jackie was telling the truth, Jack's murder wasn't an accident. It was a carefully planned crime. The only question that remained was Laurie just a pawn in this scheme, or had she orchestrated the entire plan to have her husband killed? On April 4, 2012, more than 48 hours after she called 911 and reported that Jack was dead, police arrested Laurie Cohn for conspiracy to commit murder. That same day, officers knocked on the door of Shauna Bayless. Just as investigators were handcuffing Shauna, an unidentified man bolted from the back of her house and jumped into a swimming pool. Police pulled him out and identified him as a criminal named Gary Gallion. Once in custody, Gary refused to speak, but Shauna did. She gave up names, revealed key details, and started with a confession, openly admitting her involvement. Shauna stated that Laurie was furious and devastated after Jack kicked her out of the house. That's when she and Gary began plotting the robbery. Shauna also claimed that Laurie had told Gary exactly how to disable Jack's security system. "The first thing you do when you get inside that room is take the DVR," Laurie allegedly instructed. On the night of April 1, Laurie went to a casino to establish an alibi. She was there with her daughter, while Shauna drove Gary to Jack's store. Gary was supposed to steal Jack's truck for his getaway, but the plan hit a snag. Frustrated, he called Shauna and said, "Hey, the gate is locked." Shauna then called Laurie and asked which of Jack's many keys would open the gate. "The green one," Laurie replied. According to Shauna, not long after, Gary arrived at her house with Jack's stolen truck, loaded with stolen goods, TVs, rifles, and more. It was only then, Shauna claimed, that Gary told her Jack had been murdered. On February 26, 2013, at the San Bernardino County Court, Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion officially stood trial for murder. Both were charged with the killing of Jack Cohn, Laurie's husband, in April of the previous year. Prosecutors argued that Laurie harbored deep resentment after being thrown out of the house, which ultimately drove her to plan her husband's murder. The third accomplice in the conspiracy, Shauna Bayless, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the authorities. She testified that Laurie had approached her for help in finding someone to carry out the burglary, and that person was none other than Gary Gallion. During the 9 months Laurie was in custody awaiting trial, she changed so drastically that friends and former neighbors barely recognized her. She had lost significant weight and appeared gaunt and pale. The most shocking testimony came from Laurie's daughter, Jackie. Standing before the jury, Jackie recounted how her mother was a compulsive gambler, drowning in debt, and had been kicked out of the house just months before Jack was murdered. Prosecutors argued that this was the breaking point that led Laurie to hatch her deadly plan. Shauna also testified in court, detailing Laurie's involvement from recruiting Gary for the burglary to instructing him on how to bypass Jack's security system. According to Shauna, Laurie made it clear that the first priority was to seize the DVR, ensuring no evidence was left behind. However, Gary made a critical mistake. He hid the DVR in a trash bin near a liquor store in San Bernardino. Police later found it completely intact. Though the footage did not capture Jack's murder, it clearly showed Gary breaking into Jack's gunroom. This meant he had not covered his face or attempted to conceal his identity. And if there were still any doubts about Laurie's motive, another witness stepped forward, Charles Duke. Charles testified that months before Jack's murder, Laurie had directly approached him with a murder-for-hire proposal, offering several $1,000s. His testimony was the final puzzle piece, completing the picture of a meticulously planned crime, not just a random burglary gone wrong. As the trial reached its decisive phase, Gary Gallion stood up, hoping to turn the tide in his favor. He desperately tried to deny all accusations, insisting that he had no involvement in the crime. However, prosecutors swiftly dismantled his lies. They presented a series of undeniable evidence from Shauna Bale's testimony and the recovered DVR footage to Charles Duke's incriminating statement. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Gary was the one who carried out the break-in and murdered Jack Cohn, all according to Laurie's plan. After hours of intense deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. They declared that Laurie Cohn had hired Gary Gallion not just to rob, but to kill her husband, all to fund her insatiable gambling addiction. Given the ruthless nature of their crimes, the harshest sentence was handed down: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion would never walk free again. As the courtroom doors closed, the case that had shocked many came to an end. But in its place, a permanent sentence was sealed, one that ensured those who had killed out of greed would never see the outside world again. I can't generate an image right now, but could you describe the scene in more detail? For example, the surroundings, the girl's emotions, or the dominant colors in the picture. This will help me prepare a better description when I can create images again. The trial of Ana Trujillo. With all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the trial of Ana Trujillo. With all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high, heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Ana had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. Despite her conviction, the trial of Ana Trujillo, with all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high, heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Ana had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. Despite the trial of Ana Trujillo, with all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Anna waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Anna Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Anna stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Anna Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Anna Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Anna had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. The trial of Anna Trujillo. With all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Anna Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Anna acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Anna as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Anna Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Anna waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Anna Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Anna stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Anna Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Final part of the story: Anna Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Anna had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer.